Hello, this is Pick, and welcome back to my guide for FTB NeoTech. Riffing off of what I did in the last episode, today I'll be starting by upgrading the power network to medium voltage. The main thing we're looking for in doing that is a whole bunch more advanced machine hulls. Machine hulls are what determine the power tier of a machine. If it has no hull, it's low voltage, and it has the correctly tiered hull for each of the respective voltages as you go up. I'm going to be procedurally rolling out an update to my system, in that I'll be using both medium voltage and low voltage at the same time. This is possible due to the fact that you can keep multiple cables in a block space with modern industrialization. Both the tin and electrum cables will work. In addition to this, I'll be replacing my steam turbines from low voltage to medium voltage. I'm already making plenty of steam, because you might remember from the end of last episode that I upgraded the boiler. Every machine I take off of the low voltage network will reduce some of the burden on all the other ones, until eventually the entire system is medium voltage and can sustain itself. The only reason I'm not upgrading everything at once is because it will take a while to get all the hulls I need, as aluminum production at this stage of the game is a little slow. Speaking of aluminum, let's get a little more going, huh? As a reminder of the four methods of obtaining aluminum, we have bauxite ore, of course, emerald electrolyzation, lapis electrolyzation, and centrifuging ruby dust. You're gonna end up making aluminum using all of these methods, but I might as well hook up the lapis. Of course, you'll have to manage all of the extra byproducts that come with it. It was probably about time that I did this. I should really be upgrading the other steam quarry into an electric one. I should also move the quarries, but I guess I don't feel like doing that just yet. Since I'm upgrading the power for all the machines in the tower, I am going to also need to upgrade it everywhere else. In fact, I'd like to prioritize this now that they're going to be running more consistently. The more power coming into the quarries, the more energy I have to produce ores, and the quicker I'll make them. That should about do it for upgrading everything that was on the system. Remember that for multi-blocks, you're going to need medium voltage ports instead of low voltage ones. Now the factory can run at a speed that somewhat resembles being functional, instead of waiting way too long for individual things to craft. I will be leaving the machines on the bottom floor as low voltage, just I don't really need them yet. They're manual machines, so they don't really need a high throughput because I'm not going to be using more than one at a time. Since I never properly automated it in the previous episode, how about we automate that silicon now? To get started with that, I'm going to need some Certus quartz. So to get started, I'll set up the dedicated Certus barrel that will be handling this stuff inside the base. I'll be using an advanced block breaker with the Celestigen pickaxe, much like in the coal coke automation. I've already set it up to deliver to the barrel, and then I just need to run some power over to it, and because it's a Celestigen pickaxe, please remember to turn off hammer mode. You're not going to have a very good time if you leave hammer mode on, at least for something this particular. Then whitelist the block breaker to the proper stage, that will be the Certus Quartz cluster, and this thing is enchanted to have Fortune 2 on it. I could have gone for Fortune 3, but 2 is good enough. You can give this thing a very wide area to cover, though because of the hammer shenanigans I messed it up and ruined 2 of my flawless Certus. I could go get more, but it's not really necessary right now. A useful tip for working with sophisticated storage double chests is that if you break the left side, it will keep its contents. But if you break the right side, it will spill them all out onto the ground. I don't know how much I'll be doing that at this stage, but good to know, I guess. Might as well have said it, right? Want to see me claim all of the unclaimed quest rewards? Well, here you go. Good thing I actually have the storage space to put these things in, huh? Just a bit of anarchy. Well, that and I don't really use the quest rewards, obviously, unless I state it's otherwise useful. I expanded the sugarcane farm. I need more sugar. One of my goals for today is going to require quite a lot of it. So, all of the soil has been upgraded to void shimmer, and I added another 2 rows. Said thing I'm doing being making a distillery. The distillery is fairly slow and has an incredibly poor yield. A yield of what? Ethanol, from sugar solution. That's why I need so much sugar. I'm going to be going through it very quickly. So naturally I put down a macerator and then a mixer, and I'm making that sugar solution. It takes 100 millibuckets of sugar solution to get 1 millibucket of ethanol. Submitting the quest for this requires use of the task screen. Simply place the task screen down, pump the ethanol into it, and then set it to the right quest. In this case, we want 1 bucket of ethanol. It'll slowly fill over time as we slowly make ethanol, but of course there's plenty of other stuff to do in the meantime. If you haven't made stainless steel yet, now would be a great time to go through that. It's finally time to expand the storage room beyond basic materials. Now I'll be storing microcrafting components, like the ones for analog circuits. You're going to want to start to get a large backlog of these things because you're going to need a whole ton of circuits. And a nice buffer keeps things running smooth while you're not producing them at a very fast rate. The default growth speed of Certus quartz is of course not that great. Well, we can find a way around that. By making a crystal growth accelerator and a crystal resonance generator, I can make and power a method to increase the speed at which our Certus quartz grows. Of course, it works best with the flawless Certus quartz that we have. The crystal resonance generator itself is a simple free form of AE power generation. Note that this is explicitly for AE power generation, and you can only have one of them on a given network. If you put 2 on, it will shut both down. But for isolated crystal growth generators, that's perfect. All we want is a bit of growth speed after all. And it fits seamlessly into our current setup. Simply place it in a corresponding position and hook up the generator, and it should just work. If you're running an early AE system and don't want it browning out on you every time you want to take out an item, the resonance generator might also be useful for that. Alright, time for a little bit of pain, but the reward will be fine worth it. It's time for Forcecraft Progression. In order to get started, you'll need a Force Infuser and some Force Gems. The way to progress in Forcecraft is to make a bunch of objects and infuse them. The more you infuse it, the more points you get, and once you get enough points, you level up. You're also required to do one of each infusion type per tier, so craft an upgrade tome, as well as some various force tools. It would also be handy to have a grindstone nearby. You can kind of cheat having to make a whole bunch of force tools by just removing the infusions from ones you've already infused. Most of this stuff isn't that helpful anyway, especially at this point for me. You'll also need some force logs to make force sticks, and force logs obviously come from a force tree, which is grown from a force sapling. What type of force? I don't know. Mechanical? Electrical? Magnetic? It doesn't say, it's just force. There's a button in the Force Infuser that takes you to the book from Forcecraft. This will tell you what each of the things you need are, as well as which item is compatible with each infusion. Most of these are pretty easy to get. I believe you get claws from bats. I think I found one in a loot chest, or maybe I just got it from a bat. Either way, you only need one. If you need more points, you'll just have to grindstone and then re-infuse a tool. The process is fairly straightforward and repetitive, so obviously I'm not going to show most of it. There's only one infusion that I'm really interested in anyway, and it's going to require getting all the way up to level 6. Remember that book of experience we have? Well, if you craft it with the Force Rod and it has experience in it, you'll get upgrade cores. 1 per 100 experience. You'll want at least 5. That should handle all of the crafting for upgrading your tome. Each of the various cores does something different when put in a force furnace, but I'm not using force furnaces, so I guess I don't really care. Alright, now for what we actually came here to make. Time torches. This is that level 6 infusion recipe that I was talking about. When you infuse a force torch with a clock, you get a time torch. Time torches are tick accelerators. They add 60% speed to all of the things within their radius. They extend to everything 1 block away, so effectively a 3x3x3 cube centered around the torch. It works on just about anything, though you don't want to use it too much or you'll end up causing a lot of lag. Somewhere this is helpful is our Certus quartz setup. It just so happens that within the time torch's range we can fit all 3 of our components. That being the budding Certus, the growth accelerator, and the resonance generator. This means that everything can keep up with each other, and so all of the acceleration works together. You're not just limited to one time torch though, you can put as many down as you can fit. Some people make insanely fast setups for things using a limited number of machines because they can just time torch. This is a way of getting around the base crafting speed of some machinery. You can also use them to speed up boilers, turbines, and anything else. So now, because I have 7 turbines on the network, a time torch makes it as if I have 8, and the electrical cable is now fully saturated. I've made so much Certus now that the barrel is full, so I guess I'll need to install a void upgrade just to make sure things don't drop as entities. Since I haven't quite finished automating silicon yet though, we need sand, and while we're at it we can also make glass. You could just EMC up a cobblestone generator, or use any other various methods, but I think I'm gonna stick with the machine route. So by putting lava and water in a mixer, as well as a cobblestone catalyst, I get my original cobblestone back in the output, plus a bonus. I can then macerate this into gravel, and then sand, and smelt that into glass. This handles all of those intermediates quite simply. Now for a little bit of mechanism. To get started, make the enrichment chamber. I don't quite need it technically speaking, as I have both redstone and diamonds in high quantities thanks to EMC, obsidian too, but might as well I guess. Doesn't feel right without it. Most of the machines aren't actually that gated. You only need the introductory materials to make pretty much any of the regular machines. So let's skip right over to the pressurized reaction chamber. Remember how I said making ethanol sucks because it's slow and inefficient? Well, this will fix that. If I were to use a crusher alongside the pressurized reaction chamber, as well as an electrolytic separator, I can turn hydrogen, water, and biofuel into ethylene, and I guess substrate. Substrate might have a use later, but we're here for the ethylene. Then send the ethylene through the rotary concentrator, and wow, look at that! We made ethylene from modern industrialization, instead of using that awful ethanol method. I could also use speed upgrades and energy upgrades if I want to make them faster. The storage tool is a useful device from Sophisticated Storage. With it, you can lock and unlock your barrels, among a lot of other handy features. You can also mass lock or unlock by simply right-clicking a storage controller while it's set to lock-unlock mode. This will prevent unwanted materials from going into those barrels. When I want to whitelist them, I can simply do so by placing an item in manually. It's so much better to have a functional amount of ethylene coming in, you know, instead of that other method with ethanol. Now, let's turn that into polyethylene. There are 2 ways of getting it, but one of them is far better than the other. I guess I'll have to automate chromium now, which isn't too difficult, though it is a little complicated. You can go with the lead recipe if you want, but you both get less polyethylene for your ethylene and use more lead. And lead is surprisingly in high demand, because of all that battery alloy and soldering alloy. I'm going to go through how I automated chromium in this world, and then after the fact I will show you a combined setup of chromium and manganese in a creative world. In the creative world it will be much easier to see what I'm doing, so you can follow along. I have it chaptered though, so you can just skip right to that if you're looking for that in particular. Here you'll see my more condensed setup. To start, of course, I'm centrifuging redstone. That gives me the ruby dust I need, and of course the extra quartz dust and iron dust that come along with it. Then I centrifuge the ruby dust to get the aluminum and chromium. That's another source of aluminum if you want it. To give it a kickstart, I'll also put down some time torches, as these centrifuges can be rather slow. They need to build up their efficiency first. Beyond that are some electrolyzers and chemical reactors. The chemical reactors exist to produce hydrochloric acid and then process the crushed chromium dust with it. What's happening is that I have a water input being electrolyzed into hydrogen and oxygen. I'm voiding the oxygen for now, but I will be using it later. However, I would recommend to void the excess of both of these so that you can run an electrolyzer all the time. Salt is electrolyzed to produce sodium and chlorine, and so the chlorine is getting mixed with the hydrogen to make hydrochloric acid. The sodium is being put in storage for later. The hydrochloric acid is put into a buffer tank, and then that outputs into a chemical reactor that's making the chromium slurry. That chromium slurry is then electrolyzed to make chromium dust. It also produces hydrogen and chlorine as byproducts. This is what you'd call a recycled product. What I need to do here is take this extra hydrogen and chlorine and recycle it back into the input streams so that we're making use of all of this extra product. You could keep running the electrolyzers, of course, and for the hydrogen you are going to end up voiding a fair amount of it, but chlorine's a little more expensive, so it's handy to recycle it. I'm very particular with my priorities on these pipes, but I'll get into that when I have the dedicated section of this video for it. But yeah, that makes chromium tiny dust. Now that chromium is coming in though, I can use it to convert the ethylene into polyethylene. Polyethylene is used in a fair amount of production in the mid-game, primarily for high voltage stuff, as well as a little bit of medium voltage, which is where we're at right now. I received some free upgrades from the quest book before, but now I can actually craft them because I have polyethylene. Upgrades pretty much take components we've already automated. There's nothing too out of the way here, and I would recommend upgrading them to the advanced tier right away. The basic ones only provide 2 extra EU per unit, but the advanced ones provide 8. And I have a little bit of an expensive recipe in mind to be crafting with this. Now it's time to go hunt down a deep dark. Make sure you have Silk Touch when doing this. There are definitely better ways to get around than just running on foot. You could have tamed a horse and have it be called to you with just a hotkey, or you could have made a staff from just dire things that let you dash through the air. I'm just being lazy. Okay, after all that digging, I've made it to the deep dark biome. The first thing you're going to want to pick up is some Sculk. Because we can transmute whatever we need in more quantities, just one will do, but you might as well pick up a bunch, since it's fairly plentiful. I'm after a Sculk Shrieker. The best place to find this would be an ancient city, but there's no way to find one of those with a structure compass, so we'll have to deal with regular mining. Instead of going down to the ancient city layer, I've just decided to do some tunneling and find a Shrieker on my own. They only spawn in open caves, so you're gonna want to wait until you have your sounds of mining picked up by a Sculk sensor. If you see those sound wave effects, you'll know that an open cave is nearby, and even what direction it's in. Okay, found one. Time to pick it up and go back. You could get an echo shard from an ancient city, but I have another method towards getting one of those. So, since I don't plan on tracking down that ancient city, I'm going to get my echo shards via quarry. If I simply put in some ferrocore swords, it'll eventually pull up a couple of echo shards, and of course I only need one, because I can transmute the other. But getting 2 from it is nice as well. Now that I have everything I need, I can make the thing I was trying to get all this time, Shadowpulse Goo. This is the final tier of goo from Just Dire Things. It allows netherite to be processed into Eclipse alloy. I'll put on the 1 netherite block I have, and make some Eclipse alloy with it. You need to process it in the electric blast furnace with some ender dust. Netherite scrap has an EMC value, and that's what I should be doing to get more, but I decided on something else. Eclipse alloy tools have a few traits that make them extremely good for finding more netherite, I guess more useful for normal packs without EMC. The first is that it can just break blocks instantly. This doesn't require an enchant. The second is the X-ray feature. It's like the ore discovery feature, but it tells you exactly what the block is. So now hunting for ancient debris is an absolute joke. Of course you can turn the insta-break off because I know that would be annoying. It also has a Paxel form, but I don't need a Paxel yet, I have my Celesta gem. My first digital circuit is going to be manually crafted. I only want 1 at this current moment. I have a very special thing that I want from it, so I'll craft all the electronic components by hand. Yeah, it's a little annoying, but what are you gonna do? At least I have pretty much everything, and obviously I've been setting up machines in the background for auto crafting. Like I said, there's only so much of that I have to show. It gets boring to watch. Alright, this is it. The moment you've been waiting for. I can finally make the energy condenser. This wonderful box allows automation of the transmutation table pretty much, though it can only handle 1 recipe at a time. That being said, this mechanic is very broken, and you know what, it kinda feels like cheating. I guess I did say I was gonna cheat, and now I'm finally cheating. Wait, what do you mean using intentional game mechanics isn't cheating? Well, in any case, I'm only going to be using it for drills, and like maybe a couple of other things. That's why I set up all this other automation, you know, so that I can do things in a more practical manner that feels more automated. I don't know, it feels right, you know? Of course, the first thing you're going to want to do is throw that thing in the transmutation table so you can get a second. Then we can start automatically producing more condensers. Because that recipe was a little annoying. I guess it's not awful because I can just EMC everything or process everything from EMC'd components. Now I'm going to make a sort of relay barrel for storing my Certus. You see, the barrel on the main storage network down in the storage room is going to be for bulk storage of Certus. But up here I'm going to have an extra buffer, and that's going to have the void upgrade. This one is kind of an EMC storage. Because of how fast the Certus grows with the time torches, and the relatively large amount of EMC that Certus Quartz provides, I can use this as a type of EMC battery. You simply have to organize your priorities so that the condenser's input is lower than the output of the main storage. So, piping items into the condenser is one way to acquire EMC, but there's another method as well. This is where the collector comes in. The collector has 3 tiers. What it will do is when surrounded by light, that means either daylight or other collectors or anything else, it will start to produce EMC, the amount it says on it, with, I believe, higher efficiency for higher light levels. If that mechanic is working properly, it will automatically output this EMC to any adjacent relays or condensers, and the condenser will use it to generate items. Obviously, you're going to want to just skip to the 3rd tier if you have the EMC to make the red matter. Red matter is the tier beyond dark matter. Relays are something that should work, but unfortunately they don't, so you can't make a proper power flower. So the most you'll feasibly be able to put around a condenser is 5 if you want to access it manually, or 6 if you want to do it automatically and you can use an entangled block. Now I have everything I need to automatically produce drills from EMC. One tier 3 collector is enough to outpace a base speed electric quarry with a medium voltage input, for both bronze and steel. I haven't tested it with the other types yet, but you can always just add more condensers. It goes without saying that now that I've automated drills, I need to make sure I have the energy to keep up with the demand for ore production. For right now I should have enough, but I will be encountering power problems down the line. At least now ore production is completely automatic. I don't have to lift a single finger to get more ores. Before I had to keep transmuting more drills. Also, because of this, I'm going to start trashing my excess ores, as it's just going to end up clogging the chests. Obviously, this will be set to the lowest priority possible. Well, you know, the lowest one above the extraction priority, and it'll be whitelisted. With basic resource generation finally squared away for good, well, beyond, you know, making it faster, I guess, I went ahead and automated the rest of the stainless steel process. So, of course, we have what I had before with the chromium, but I've added manganese to the mix. Much like the chlorine from the other processing cycle, the sulfuric acid in manganese is what gets recycled this time. And I have the stainless steel being blasted and frozen. Everything has its own dedicated blast furnace and vacuum freezer. You could share if you want, especially if you have larger port sizes, but with the amount of material I have at this stage, it's not really worth it. I can make as many machines as I want. After all, you know I'm swimming in it when I use advanced machine hulls as pipe covers. So, alongside manganese production, I've set up mixers to make the stainless steel and a bunch of packers to pack dust together, as well as copper-nickel cables, candle cables, and both of those coils in an assembler because I need more blast furnaces, and it's good to have those on standby. I'm sure this whole process is a little overwhelming though, so let's finally go to the creative world and explain how this thing all works. You're not going to learn much from my spaghetti here. Okay, so I've laid out all of the machines required for processing chromium and manganese, and they're in a nice neat format so that you can see what they are and what they're producing. They're not all running yet, but I'll be doing that as I talk. Anything coming from a creative barrel is something I assume you're having produced in some manner. The redstone comes from bronze drills, the salt from steel drills, the sulfur from bronze drills because it's from coal, the raw iron from bronze drills, and then some water. I'm also avoiding unrelated byproducts like sodium. To get started, of course, I'll be centrifuging redstone dust to turn it into ruby dust, and then that gets centrifuged again to be turned into chromium crushed dust. Likewise, on the other side, I'm centrifuging raw iron to turn it into crushed manganese dust. Now we get into the part where we're making chemicals. Okay, so if we turn on the water, we'll see that it's going into the electrolyzer, as it was in the other world. We're making the hydrogen and the oxygen, and we're also making sulfuric acid. The trick here is in the pipe priorities. The highest priority on this network is going to be the insertion pipe into the chemical reactor that's making the manganese solution. This is fairly straightforward because that's where we want it all to go, so of course it has the highest priority. The next highest priority needs to be the pipe attached to the electrolyzer that's producing the manganese dust. By having this higher than the chemical reactor that's just producing sulfuric acid, we'll make sure all of the sulfuric acid from that recycling stream is getting inserted into the processing reactor before we end up putting in any new sulfuric acid. Think of it as a type of rate limiter. I know this is a little confusing because this works a little bit differently than item pipes would. The other stream with the chlorine and hydrogen is hooked up in a similar manner. However, the hydrogen isn't that important because we're constantly producing it in oxygen, so I would just concern yourself with the chlorine here. It will save you a lot of salt if you're doing a recycling stream properly, with the same type of configuration that the sulfuric acid had. I told you it wasn't that complicated, but there were some finer details that we had to go over, and of course you can pause the video if you want to look at the setup. Note that you will likely be using a larger item pipe network as well as needing to power all of these machines. This is set up ideally for creative. And because it's creative, that means I cheated, right? What do you mean doing creative testing in a creative world and not my main world isn't cheating? Now that we're finally done with that, how about I finally upgrade the Transmutation Table into a Transmutation Tablet? The difference? Well, one's handheld, so that means I can create items wherever I am and however much I want as long as I have the EMC. I set up the condenser with red matter so I can always fill the tablet whenever I want. Alright, I've set up a bunch of assemblers. They're all for the purpose of automating digital circuits and their components. Other than anything I've already automated, of course. In addition, I've made a bonus assembler for resistors, as despite making 12 of them per craft, you need so many that they absolutely need a dedicated assembler. I'd like to make a circuit factory at some point, but for right now it's going in the main tower. Of course, I've already made a digital circuit this episode, so you don't really need to see how to make it. Just more automation via assembler. Stainless steel turns into stainless steel rods. I'm getting neodymium as a byproduct of the chromium processing chain. And then that goes into a packer, and both of those get combined in a polarizer to make magnetic stainless steel rods. As an important side note, sometimes the Force Infuser can bug out and start eating all of your power on your network. In order to stop this from happening, I've simply used an energy cube as a diode. What that means is that I can turn off the power, and it only lets power flow in one direction. You'll be able to tell if your Force Infuser is killing your energy network. Just look at it and its energy buffer won't be full. If you're time torching your steam turbines, it might be a wise idea to double up on the cabling. So because I'm making medium voltage, I'll be using cupronickel for that. By running a cupronickel line up to some of my other machines, I can start diverting the power throughput, and it'll make sure that all the machines on the line are running with sufficient energy. I won't be running it to all of my machines, but making sure that stainless steel production keeps going is important. Now that I'm running all of that sufficiently, all of my machines are making things for digital circuits at an efficient rate, or at least an efficient enough rate. So now I can get on those magnetic neodymium rods I mentioned before. That should take care of almost all of the components for advanced motors, though we're still missing annealed copper wire. Annealed copper isn't too difficult to get, though once again we're gonna need another blast furnace and vacuum freezer. Okay, that's annealed copper taken care of, both blast furnace and vacuum freezer. Note that to make annealed copper, you're going to need an input of oxygen, so I just mooched that off of the automated production setup from the electrolyzer. Of course, I'll be taking care of plate and wire production off camera, because that's boring. Okay, now I can make an advanced motor, and I can turn that advanced motor into an advanced pump once I get all the materials in order. For that, I'm going to need stainless steel rotors, so that's the same as any other rotor. Combine that into the pumps. How much of this do you guys actually want to see? Let me know in the comments. I had to balance both my crafting progression and, you know, the crafting. Okay, advanced pump is done. Which means that we have everything we need now, once I claim a quest reward, to make some stainless steel drills after I craft the drill head. Hey look, I've crafted the drill head. I can make the stainless steel drill, and there you go. What can I use this thing for? A number of things. Ores obviously, but we get access to shale oil. I'll be working with oil production next time, don't you worry. For now though, we're done. Stainless steel drill makes for a good stopping point. The condenser is a major milestone, and of course I'll be condensing these stainless steel drills, but that's beside the point. So, for now, this has been Pick. I'm glad to have seen you, and I hope to see you again.